you are all doing okay. Just gonna jump straight in today. So today I am going to talk about our actions. So before I go into that, if you haven't seen me before, I am Mel. I'm an eating mindset coach, helping people quit their addictions to food without dieting, and I specialize in eating disorders, but really anything to do with any eating challenges. So today's subject is the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. So everyone is built the same. So all of our actions that we do today is predominantly run by our subconscious mind. So most of us are thinking that we have control in most situations. In actual fact, we don't have that much control, because most of the things that we do is on autopilot. And what I mean is, like, things that are kept in the subconscious mind is things like the ability to talk, because we weren't born able to talk, we weren't born able to walk, and we weren't born to do a lot of the things. And so basically, as soon as we build a skill, we then lock it into the subconscious mind, so we don't have to worry about it anymore because it's automatic. So then we have only 10% of our brains that actually deals with new things. So if you think about it, just driving a car, if we had to think about everything every time you got in the car, it would be absolutely exhausting. You'd sit in the car and you'd be, every single time you'd be thinking, well, I have to move this gear stick, and I have to look in the mirror, and then I have to put my foot down. If you didn't have your subconscious mind, you probably wouldn't even leave the car park, because you were there, like, you have so many things to think about. And that's not even thinking about a new route that you have to go to. So it's the same as like getting out of bed. You don't have to think about moving your legs or walking or talking, or like me at the moment, I'm quite very proficient in talking, so I don't have to worry about breathing and talking at the same time, because that is all in the subconscious mind. So how does this relate to eating? So everything is related to it, because we've already spoken about, like, the rules of the mind. We like to go towards pleasure and away from pain, familiar, and the pictures and the fears. So I'm going to go and talk about my history in dieting, because it's all related to eating challenges. And one of the reasons why diets don't work is because most of it is relying on the mindset, and it's not in a good way, because most diets contradicts every single rule that the mind has. For example, a diet restricts, puts things into categories. So, like, I'm going to explain my experience to make it easier. So I started dieting when I was 14 years old, because I started filling out, I wasn't like skinny anymore like I was a child. I started getting my womanly shape, and I was like doing karate as well, so I was getting quite muscly. And a boy, I don't even think I like fancy doing them or anything, but he made a comment that my legs, my calves look like darts. And the shape of a dart, it's like that. And I really didn't like it. So that was it. That was the beginning of my dieting phase. The problem is the brain doesn't physically see what is happening in your world. It relies to everything you tell it. But most of the time, the things that we're telling the brain are not quite true. So I was there trying to diet, but the brain didn't understand that. The brain was thinking, hey, hang on a sec, 1 minute you're eating fine, and the next minute you're not eating anything. So there was all sorts of repercussions by me trying to restrict myself too much. So what's the most logical thing to do? Every time I ate, it tried to keep everything in my body, which makes sense really, because it thinks it's starving. So now I'm not giving it any food. So when I did give it some food, it would just keep everything. Hence why once I started dieting, I found it extremely difficult to go back to lose weight, because the more I dieted, the more I would just pile on weight just like that. And the reason is because every time I dieted, I was telling my brain I was like in famine, food scarcity. So whenever I fed it something, it just wouldn't let it go. So my digestive system started going. I posted a post on my Facebook page how I only pooed, I think, once a week or once every 2 weeks. I know, it was so bad because I had mucked up with my body. So that wasn't only the only thing. Once I started categorizing things in, this is good food and this is bad food. So again, with the mind, it doesn't matter whether it's good or not. The brain doesn't have any logic. So if you're there saying, I can't have cake, I can't have a biscuit, I can't do this, I can't do that, what do you think the brain's doing? It's thinking cake, biscuit. It deletes that word can't. It deletes that word I want to lose weight. It deletes saying it's bad. All it's doing is like thinking cake, biscuit, sweets, ice cream, because you're obsessing about it. And that's the thing. I ended up being obsessed with food. So the thing that I was trying to keep away from, I was constantly thinking about food, because I started restricting. Then I started categorizing things were bad or not. And because I've restricted myself with the foods, and it's usually like the things like cakes and, I mean, I wouldn't restrict myself with broccoli, would I? But you kind of get the gist of the stuff that I restricted myself from. But because I made such a big deal out of it, my mind was like zoning in even more. It's almost like if you ever go outside, I don't know if you've ever done this before. I remember when I was like buying a car, and I wanted an XR2, a red one in particular. I went from one day not seeing any XR2s. I swear that as soon as I needed or wanted an XR2, I saw them everywhere. And the reason for that is because this isn't a rule of the mind. This is like our eyes, our vision. We're not actually aware of everything that we see. We are selective. You've probably heard of selective hearing, but we also select what we see. We only see what we want to see. So when you go outside, you'll probably don't even notice that they've had some tests done when people were like, they were doing a test and they've been told to concentrate on something, and they had like this gorilla walk past dancing in front of them, and I think it was like 3/4 of them, 70% of them didn't notice this man dressed up in a gorilla, because of the fact we only focus on what we want to focus on. So that actually made sense as well, because I was trying not to focus on the cakes, but because I was giving it so much attention, my mind was just zoning in. So whenever I was like walking around everywhere, it's almost like the house was looking like a cake and everything was looking like a cake. So when I started restricting myself as well and not letting myself have the cake, when I did cave in, I just enjoyed it so much. And the problem was that the messages that I was saying myself, I felt such a relief, because I've deprived myself for so long of these cakes and all these like processed foods, that when I did have it, it sent like this kind of pleasure feeling around my head, because it's something I've deprived myself from for such a long time. And it compounded by me like wanting and saying the messages in my head. These things are just so good. They're so good. But going back to the whole point of me talking about how I got dieting is, if I had known that the reasons why I was acting like this is because it was just completely natural human survival instincts. And the problem is, with willpower, me trying to not eat these crap foods or these like sweets or chocolates and cakes, that was only the 10% part of me. The 10% of my mind who wanted to eat healthily, who wanted to lose weight, who didn't want to diet, that was only 10% of my brain, because that was my conscious brain trying to make all this effort. And that's where willpower comes from. It's like 10% of your brain, but 90% of our brains is the subconscious mind. It's the subconscious mind where it's picked up habits. So bearing in mind, I started dieting, and on the first day, I probably wouldn't have been addicted to eating cakes or chocolates or things like that. But the more often that I behaved in such a radical way, like restricting my food and putting food into categories, the more my brain was getting into a habit of restricting myself. So basically, I had been trying to fight with my 10% brain of things that I've deeply embedded into my habits now. So if I had known about this therapy, I would probably never have suffered for over 20 years of my life of this dieting yo-yo, feeling guilty, feeling stressed, because all I wanted to do is just have a normal relationship to food. But I couldn't, because I was just trapped in this cycle of eating and then depriving, and then went on to so many diets. But the problem with all these diets, it doesn't work. None of them works, because it's all restricting. It makes you obsess over food. And that's why I was like saying about the white elephant. When you're on Weight Watchers, it says you have to stick to so many calories. So you end up thinking about food all the time. And before you know it, you're stuck in this cycle, and it's really hard to get out. Anyway, I hope you got some nuggets in that, and I hope you have a lovely